Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner, where we talk about all things human development and developing talent for high performing individuals. Brought to you by your favorite AI coaches, or at least the most passionate AI coaches in the world, SimTrain. Super excited to have our guest on with us today, Joel Sylvester. He's founder and chief client officer of Five Star Solutions. Very focused himself in his career on developing talent and building a world-class operations. And Joel, maybe you can add a little color on Five Star Solutions, some of the things you guys are working on, and even that name change to Five Star Solutions before we get into it.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Great chatting with you today. As you'd mentioned, Five Star Solutions recently had a kind of an evolution. So, we had been five-star call centers for many years, and we had really realized that in today's world, we were becoming a lot more than that. We were really a full CX channel platform for all things customer experience. So, that includes technology, coaching, process improvement. We're still, staffing and business process outsourcing, both voice and non-voice, but we were just doing so many more things for our partners, and there was so much more demand in the space from that of it. In fact, I actually spent 15 years working in financial services. In an in-house contact center, and I was in charge of all the outsourcers. And the reason that I was interested in leaving and starting Five Star was just because I was not seeing an all-in solution that would offer everything that a person needed to stay up with the industry, again, from recruiting to training to engagement, automation, best technology, best processes, things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as a vendor for Five Star, I can attest the work that Chris and Nick do from the approach of technology services and solutions. It's second to none. Definitely world-class activity. I think, Joel, you mentioned, right? I had a passion for starting Five Star based on my own experience, right? And you've spent a lot of your career, both internally helping Five Star and other companies and organizations focus on their customer experience and what they're doing to perform better. And when you think about, the best leaders you work with and those that coach most effectively, what do they do different when it comes to coaching their teams and individual contributors within those teams? What do you see?
I wish I had some fancy solution, but having worked with hundreds of companies, I actually started off. My dad was an electrician, so I worked in construction, and found out the hard way that if you don't have the right foundation, you think about a bricklayer. If that first brick is off by one hundredth of a millimeter, and then you build a 20-story skyscraper, by the time you get to the top, it's going to be off by a long way. So the leaders that we work with and the organizations we work with, we always really focus on, do you have that foundation? The core values to make sure that you're hiring the right people, bringing in the right people, training them the right way, giving them that initial foundational piece. Really focusing on, it's usually the 80-20 rule. 20% of the knowledge handles 80% of the problems. Making sure you get that right. I had a leader once that said there's easy stuff and there's hard stuff within an organization. Easy stuff is hiring the right people, setting the right expectations, giving them the right tools. Hard stuff is hitting metrics, dealing with upset customers, dealing with internet outages or problems or things that go wrong, healthcare issues. So get the easy things right, and the hard things become much more manageable.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a great answer, right? Is do the fundamentals and set the foundational stuff that you can control. That's what you consider easier. I think that's great. And I love the fact that you started your career building skyscrapers, Joel. That's awesome. Hey, when it comes to that, when it comes to hitting goals, right? And you think about, how do we assess and where we talk about Five Star, really tech, coaching, process, people as well. How do you determine if an issue is actually an individual contributor, it's a coaching issue, preparation issue, maybe it's one of your leaders, or maybe it's a process? How do you drill in and determine, root cause and what do you want to coach to and develop?
Well, this is where I'm glad to be living in today's age, because 30 years ago it was a heck of a lot harder, right? You had to manually listen to thousands of calls, like and hope you got lucky and found it. And today the really nice part is with all the data, all the speech analytics, it's a lot easier to kind of, sync through and identify what that is and find the outliers. You can identify exactly when a customer gets frustrated or exactly when a team member gets frustrated. And Dan, that is in the interview process, that is in the training process, that is in the everyday process, the day in, the day out, the customer interactions. And that's whether it's, a voice interaction or an email or a chat or social media. So the amount of data that we have access today to is so amazing that you can find those problems so much sooner and things like that. So it's a matter of really making sure you're paying attention to the data, making sure you're getting it all, analyzing it, and then doing something with it. A lot of times again, not that long ago, 10, 15 years ago, a guy may had to make an assumption based on one or two pieces of feedback and then go run down that rabbit hole. Now you can get so much more information, and it makes it makes your hypothesis a lot faster to form and a lot faster to either prove or disprove.
Yeah, I think the big difference between kind of this era of big data and the era of AI is being able to leverage that big data to have much better insights, right? And you mentioned the interview process, the training process, and the everyday, which is for us, it's continuous development, continuous training. We love being a solution that turns insights into action. And speaking of which, right, and that's AI coaching, AI training through SimTrain. When everyone's now talking AI, right, and I just threw it in there twice just to kind of mention
Yeah.
insight to action. Joel, what excites you most about the role AI is playing, with Five Star and with your customers in coaching and employee development? Where do you think the human element remains irreplaceable, and where does AI come in to really support that journey?
Well, it's really twofold. It's if you can dream it, you can do it. I think early on in my career, I had some people that were dreamers, but there was no way we had the resources to take advantage of some of those dreams, or those think big, those big high level type things. You think of the things that are going on in the world. We have a SpaceX IPO coming out next week, and the things people are talking about that you can literally, even as a relatively, small business, if you can come up with an idea, there's really no reason that you can't utilize some of the technology that exists today to be able to, really make that happen. For me personally, what I'm most excited about is the impact on humans that we're able to do. So we're in 3 countries and we're in multiple states and we're mostly work at home. And the training, the fact that agents can train, you might come in, Dan, and you have great technical skills, and I have great empathy, and we're on the same project. So your training can be customized to you. You can breeze through the technical piece of it and test out, clep out, like in the old college days. And you
Yeah.
can spend some more time on what your areas of need are, and then vice versa. It can be customized to me. Maybe I can't, maybe I've got something going on and I can't get to a training class at 8 a.m., but I can do it from 6 to 7. And in the old days, like 10 years ago, that person probably would struggle getting caught up with training, would probably be deemed as not reliable or not a great team member. Maybe someone learns differently. Maybe they have a disability. Maybe it's a physical disability or they just learn differently. In the old days, 10 years ago, a lot of times I unfortunately saw some of those agents that just weren't able to be successful because the technology and the process and the training didn't exist to meet them where they are. And now you can take good people who want to do well and you can move them further, faster along their career than you would have been able to do in the past. But one of the things we're just starting to get into, and I'm actually presenting on in a couple weeks at a conference, is looking at agent schedules. I'm a morning person. I'm up at 3:45 in the morning. I do my devotionals. I do my workout. I'm in by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I am spent. And we have a lot of team members that are awake. That vice versa. My brother is a night owl. He would
Yeah.
struggle ever getting to work at 7 a.m. And we can now use the technology to understand when people's empathy is strongest, when their problem solving is strongest, maybe when their sales success is strongest. And you can cut instead of saying, Dan, you work 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. You take your breaks at 10 and 2. You take your lunch at noon. We can literally get to where we're like, send you a note that says, Dan, you are killing it right now. You're supposed to go on break, but things are looking good. Are you good? And you'd be like, yeah, I would love to keep rocking and rolling. And then vice versa. It might be 3 o'clock in the afternoon and your shift doesn't end till 4, but you're not doing so great. It might be a time to send you a note and be like, hey Dan, we've got some VTO available. If you'd want to, take off now and come in an hour early tomorrow because we'll have need. We are going to be able to customize that, and it is just such a better experience for everybody. The worst part about your job is when you're not doing it well. You're not trained well, you're not engaged, and we can now identify that way earlier than we used to be able to. I like to say I know if an agent is going to leave before they do because their empathy starts to go down, their engagement starts to go down, their frustration starts to go up, their customer scores start to go up. ESAT, employee satisfaction. I believe if you drive strong employee satisfaction, your CSAT, your customer satisfaction is going to come right along with it. So we have tools to be able to focus on that and really customize that we never had before.
That's awesome. I love the fact you're going to be talking about dynamic scheduling and using AI to do real-time schedule adjustments. There's two other concepts you shared in there, right? One that I'm very passionate about, which is, how to use AI. We talk about a digital coach for everyone at SimTrain, right? How to use AI to customize those learning paths and learning journeys and make it a mentor relationship between your learning activity and SimTrain and the user experience. But one of the things you brought up, right, are these not just where you're starting from and if you're klepping out, but me as a user defined field saying, hey, I'm a visual learner or I'm an auditory learner. And it's so funny. Sometimes you find out like, no, you're not. Like, you know what? You're not responding to those training mechanisms as well as you're responding to some others. And you're saying, yeah, we could start identifying that and putting the velocity, the time frame, a lot of different parameters around how people get prepared for their job and then how they continuously develop and upskill based on flags and triggers, which was that third concept that you guys are working on. So I love all three of those things, right? Custom journeys, how do I flag or trigger different, continuous coaching? And then how do I schedule this dynamically, whether it's training or shift breaks or uptime? That's awesome. And on the flip side of AI and technology, right? As contact centers and CX operators, have evolved significantly. You said I love doing this now versus 30 years ago, but the truth is, you're younger than I am, but you were doing this, almost 30 years ago, right? But in a world of agentic AI, what skills do you look for? Are you telling your leaders and future leaders at Five Star that they need to develop in order to stay successful in this changing environment, Joel?
Yeah, and that has changed a little bit. I think problem solving has always been a piece of it, but we do need people to think outside the box more than probably you did in the past.
Yeah.
I think things used to have to be very rigid because it just needed it from a consistency standpoint. Now, a lot of the manual, repetitive compliance type processes are taken care of with the AI, so you do need somebody that can think outside the box. And then really, I do believe that people that were too creative in the past maybe got left behind because they just were almost seen as a complainer or a problem, where now we need people to have that creative view. And then also just being having the confidence to raise their hand. You were talking about a lot of the things that we do with SimTrain and SimTrain does. You will have agents that will have a great training experience, but maybe we haven't adopted a certain part of our training or we haven't adjusted a certain part of our training just because we haven't gotten around to it. Our agents will be the ones that'll be like, why isn't all your training like this? And then it's like it's a good tap on the shoulder or a nudge for us to like, okay, if we are going to be presenting that this is the world-class way to do it, then we need to drink the Kool-Aid and follow our own advice, and we need to look at every one of our processes and make sure we're doing it the right way. That recruiting needs to be consistent with training, needs to be consistent with coaching, needs to be consistent with all of the different automated, pieces that people do as far as that goes. One thing that's a little bit unique is, and one of the things we're really tackling as an industry is the true entry level positions are kind of going away, right? The positions that are needed are kind of what we used to call tier two or even tier three, and we're trying to figure out, well, if someone used to spend 6 months in tier one to get to tier two, and then a year in tier two to get to tier three, and then a year in tier three to become a supervisor, and then a year as a supervisor to become a manager, then if tier one is being handled with an automated AI type solution, and maybe even, tier 1.5, then how do you ever move someone along those lines? And that's really something we're starting to look at. Some of our partners are holding out about 20% of their volume to as a proving ground, right, for people to be able to do that. And then others is that's where we're really leaning into technology to say, you know what, you're not actually going to learn a lot of your core foundational stuff by doing it. You're going to learn it in training, and you're going to actually hit the ground running with that piece of it. So now I'm in the contact center industry, and I truly believe we're being pushed to do it. I'm not sure how that works for a doctor, right? I don't know if a doctor can just jump right in at brain surgery, and kind of how some of that stuff works out. But as an industry, I think the fact that we're asking the questions and looking at it and saying, what would it take to get there? What data is needed? What tech stack is needed? What processes are needed? What kind of training is needed? What kind of tools and resources are needed? It's good that we're having those conversations because that's what it's going to take, that innovative thinking to get us to move along that line and really make sure that supply and demand meet up, that the demand doesn't outrun supply and supply doesn't outrun demand.
That's awesome. Joy, I had a guest one time just comment, oh, great question, great question. I started calculating it and I was 3 for 3, and I think I wound up 5 for 7 on great question statements back. But that's probably one of my best answers I've ever heard because it's very
Okay.
aligned with some of the things we believe wholeheartedly at SimTrain, right? If you think about it, we'd go out and talk to investors and like, come on, man, you're going to be out of business in a few years. Simulation-based training for humans. I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, it's all going to move over to AI and AI CX, and you're not going to have any customers. Well, they're not putting humans out of business, right? There's still 8 billion of those. And by the way, you know what AI is removing? It's removing the training layer, right? Today, or for the past 50 years, people learn how to perform their job as apprentices, right? As apprentices. And you're taking that away. So they're jumping into a tier two or tier three type of skill set. They got to be way better prepared and way more advanced training. And that's where sim training comes in. So that's really awesome that you identified that and you guys are thinking about the same journey. And in my opinion, Joel, is those brain surgeons, right? They're not going to jump right into brain surgery, but I think they're going to be expected to do more complex brain surgery and get there a lot sooner because of the augmentation of AI, even in their work streams, right? So it adds complexity and many medical advances with what humans will now be more capable of doing. So that's a pretty awesome view. And what I love
Well,
about
and it's our responsibility to build the tools too, that if we know this agent is going to be on the phone sooner or taking more complex issues sooner, we need to make sure that they've got agent assist and they've got the speech analytics telling them great call, or you could have done this different, or you know what, it's time to go do some refresher training or whatever. So it's our responsibility also to say we can't just if tier two, if people are going to arrive at tier two or tier three sooner, with a different experience, we need to make sure that we're giving them the tools to succeed, really when they do get there. The other thing that we're seeing is, again, I told you I spent the first 15 years at an in-house call center. We are
Yep.
seeing so much more demand. We're a business process outsourcer that so many more groups are realizing we just have to outsource our customer experience because it's not a core competency for us. We can't do it as well, but that allows them to take that distraction away so organizations can really focus on what they're doing best, brain surgery if that's the case, right? And really develop their tools and make that the best it's ever been. And right alongside that, CX is going to become the best it's ever been and is becoming the best it's ever been, from the end of it. So, and then you had brought up, generationally, everybody I know is understaffed, right? When I speak and do workshops, I ask who's understaffed and everybody raises their hand. So if you're 20% understaffed right now, well, let's do this. Let's figure out a way to make you 20% more efficient and then you're good. As opposed to continuing to try to, chase the revolving, talent door from that end of it. So I think as a society, it can be scary when you see what AI can do, but it also is if we're not making these innovations, as people are having less children, as people are whatever, just choosing not to have kids as early in life. If we don't really focus on some of these efficiencies now, we're gonna have a time when we do not have enough work getting done, and it's gonna cause a problem.
That's awesome. So I just went to a healthcare contact center Times conference yesterday, and those brain surgeons they were talking about scheduling and patient access, right? So PX was a big term, patient experience. Obviously, we hear about CX a lot, and then EX. You brought it up twice earlier. First time I've ever heard someone bring up FX on one of these coaches corner sessions, which is the family experience, Joel. So you address the having less kids and what that family experience is looking like going forward. So definitely appreciate that you introducing the FX concept into these conversations. But you also, Joel, you talked about tools and you said, hey, the burden is on an employer. Right. And I always said with millennials, people used to complain, hey, millennials don't work as hard. They're not willing to put as much in. And I always countered that and said, no, they're holding employers more accountable. They have a higher expectation of what the employer's contribution is versus just their own. And I love that as an employer. I up my game, just like you said you're doing now at Five Star, right? And one of the things, if you think about balancing this operational blend across the tool set and the AI and the technology, the efficiency, right? Employee engagement. Like, how do you train and coach your leaders and your future leaders to really improve results and outcomes, but without losing their focus on the people behind those metrics, Joel? How are you doing that today?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we talk more about EX or EEX than CX or
Yep.
ESAT than CSAT. And that is we're in the people business. Even though we also do technology, a lot of it, we do automation, we do processes, we do project management, we do all those things. We're ultimately in the people business. And as you look at root cause analysis, it's easy to say XYZ team member messed this up. Okay, that's fine. Let's look at the process, right? And we've all done this, right? Where you process map something, you're like, okay, so this team member had to go to 11 systems. They had to look at 14 fields. Their average handle time goal is 8 minutes. They had to, take all of this different information and make a decision. Did the team member really screw it up, or did we put this team member in just about? Oh, by the way, they had an upset customer on the other end of the phone saying, "Hey, I'm in a hurry," or telling them how I was in financial services, right? The worst call you ever got was when that customer was at the checkout line and their credit card didn't work, right? That's a high stress situation, right? They're there to buy something, and you better have a process to where you can get that agent the information they need, as quickly as possible. So I just think that's really our mindset. our vision is we're focused on world-class customer care. That's all we do. It doesn't say, we want to have this technology or we want to have that technology, whatever. That's the vision. It's easy to do, and everything you have to that's the focus for everybody, and if everything you're doing is aligned, towards that. Again, foundationally, you're hiring the right person based on that, you're training them the right way, you're giving them the right tools to succeed.
Yeah, awesome. And given the fact that you started, your career and obviously your current career now because of your time in financial services, and you work with so many different types of customers, is there anything, can you put your finger on any like single coaching mistake or challenge that companies do pretty consistently that hurts them when it comes to trying to improve that customer experience or trying to drive a coaching cadence or a coaching rhythm within their organization? Any single mistakes or things that you see companies doing quite often, Joel, in your experience?
Yeah, I've talked financial services quite a bit, but healthcare is our largest partner now. We do a lot in retail. Again, financial services. We do a lot in technology and hospitality. And what I love about that is every one of those industries thinks they're so unique, right?
Yeah.
That anything that works in financial services isn't going to work in healthcare. But the truth of the matter is, I think you can learn more from some of those other industries. I think sometimes hospitality and retail are forward moving because they don't have as many regulations in place. It's probably the most competitive environment. It's the lowest margin environment. So some of the things that we were doing for retail and financial services, now the healthcare and the and some of the technology spaces, like we need some of that, right? Our customers are demanding we do some of those things. So I think just making sure you're not being so closed-minded and saying, oh, that won't work for us, right? Or just because it works for a retailer or financial service doesn't mean it will work for healthcare. Just because it works for healthcare doesn't mean it'll work for government. I've done hundreds of solutions, and it's probably again that 80/20 rule that about 80% of the success is going to come through the same way. And then you have to figure out that 20%, a common where possible, custom where it counts. I think a lot of leaders get way too focused on that custom piece of it as opposed to trying to solve all the broad, easy problems and then really making sure that you've got processes and solutions, to handle the other stuff that's going to come up along the way.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And Joel, we're talking about this world of AI today, right? The AI impact on business, on operations, and how companies respond and react. And if you think about looking back in your career, right, can you put your finger on maybe the most challenging transformation that you had to navigate through, or one of the big change initiatives that really helped you learn how to become a better leader or helped you become a better business person, right? And what did that transformation and the work that you did at that point in your career, what did it help teach you about, developing teams and ways to succeed yourself or to help Five Star succeed or help others be successful? Is there something?
Yeah, unfortunately, I got a lot of war stories and a lot of wounds, from that end of it. But one that really stands out is we had actually made an acquisition, and we realized that there was a big chunk of our customer base that was not a fit for us.
Yeah.
Maybe their focus was not on world-class customer care. They maybe weren't the right size for our organization. They were maybe a little bit too small, so we weren't able to invest the right things into them. They maybe didn't have the processes or the technology, and it took way too long in retrospect for us to understand that but it was frustrating. I was spending all this time trying to fix all these things that we've spent the first 30 minutes talking about. And I just
Yep.
really had to realize that not every client or every customer is a fit for the particular product or service. And so
Yeah.
we really went and we defined our service offering and said the things that make a great fit for Five Star is cultural fit. The size has to be right, can't be too big, can't be too small. They need to have processes and technologies that work or be willing to let Five Star help them with those things. They need to be within an industry that we have knowledge and can really help with. You can't be everything to everybody. And we had to have some difficult conversations with customers and say, you're just not a fit for us. We're going to help you find a new partner based on our industry knowledge and what we know. We're going to make sure the time frame works for you. And it ultimately was the best thing we ever did because it helped us focus our industry, focus our level of kind of what our talents were, what our core competencies were. So our recruiters were hiring the right people, our salespeople were going after the right accounts, our project managers were bringing the right accounts on, and things like that. So it was about, I don't know, 10 years ago, and I'm glad that time is behind me because it was some difficult conversations. But
Yep.
it was because we were spending so much time and energy not really delivering on our mission. So that's one thing that I encourage people to do is look at your organization, and if there's something that is continually going wrong, what is that root cause, and what things can you do to identify what that is? And sometimes that means moving away from a particular product line or moving away from a particular customer base. Not always easy, but ultimately team members will be better off, your organization will be better off, and ultimately your clients will be better off.
Yeah, being able to say no, right? I was taught early in my managerial career that, you're never really terminate anyone from a role. You're just kind of coaching them into a better fit for them.
Exactly.
And for you, Joel, you were forced to define your fit and what it meant for your organization. So looking at some of these customers and coaching them into not an alternate career, but maybe a better suited vendor or partner for them. I love that. And you even mentioned earlier today the core values is step one, even before training, to make sure you have that alignment. So probably really helps make that definition work as well in making some of those really difficult decisions and then executing it. So yeah, you're probably glad it's behind you, but I bet you learned a ton that helped you in the last 10 years based on that. So I really appreciate you sharing that story. I was, curious too, as you think back on different things that helped you develop some of your talent, right? Maybe there's a book, there's a podcast you're listening today. Anything you can leave our audience with an idea of, guys, here's a book I'd suggest, or, here's a podcast I like to listen to, or maybe even on a more light note, Joel, here's my favorite movie and here's why I love it. Something to leave the audience with today.
Yeah, my favorite author is Michael Lewis. And like as soon as he writes a book, and he's covered everything from, football, he wrote The Blind Side, to baseball, he wrote Moneyball, to The Big Short, to the one Going Infinite is his newest one with Sam
Yep.
Friedman and the Bitcoin. I honestly think even though they're entertaining as heck, and as soon as I pick them up, I can read them, from start to finish. There's so many concepts in there. I mean, Moneyball, the way they started I mean, I'm a big baseball fan, right?
Yep.
And this is called Coach's Corner, right, Dan? This is Coach's
Yeah.
Corner, and I'm a big sports guy, and the way that they analyzed the way that the way the hitters hit, that home runs weren't necessarily worth what they were. You should never steal a base. You should get as many walks as possible. I think you can equate a lot of that to your business or to your coaching, right? You might
Right.
have some home run hitters out there that look really good and bring in something, but you might have some 250 hitters that are walking a bunch and doing great, that are actually a better overall fit for your organization. They're driving your culture. Their CSATs are better, and things like that. So yeah, I think Michael Lewis has about a dozen books. I've read them all, and I just wish he would write more, because he's got a lot of industry out there he hasn't touched yet.
That's awesome. And fun fact, Joel. So, two characters from in Moneyball have been guests on Coach's Corner.
That's
So,
fantastic. I had no
yeah,
idea. That's great.
yeah, yeah. I thought you were once I heard you say Michael Lewis, I said, "Oh, I wonder if he's going to tie those two things together." If not, I will. So, Mike Venefro was my college roommate, and he had a whole section in Moneyball about his career that they talked about. And then my high school buddy CJ Nikowski joined us as well for an episode. He had a 13-year major league career, calls games for the Braves now. But he was in there. They actually flashed his annual salary up on when they were negotiating in there. So and it said his name, CJ Nikowski, in there as well. So they were both
Great. I'm
in
going to go back
Moneyball.
and watch it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you go watch it, and then you'll see, go watch their episodes of Coach's Corner as well.
Yeah.
They both had great sessions. You can tell Mike sitting in his hotel room compared to CJ, who does radio shows and he's a professional broadcaster. Big difference just on their lighting and some of that stuff
Yeah.
as well. So awesome, Joel. Joel, this was a great conversation. Really great stuff for people who are leading teams, building companies, thinking about how they deploy and utilize AI today. Great lessons, and I appreciate you sharing. And look forward to seeing you in Vegas in a couple of weeks, and maybe having you back on the show as well later this year.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, Dan. You know what? A year ago, our conversation would have been way different, right? So
Yeah,
that's how fast some of these things are evolving. So, yeah, can't wait to connect in 6 months or a year and see what we were right about and what we were wrong about.
I love it. Sounds good. All right, Joel. Have a great afternoon and a great weekend. And everyone,
Thanks,
thanks for
Dan.
joining. Thanks for joining. Take care. See you, Joel.